Gloria Grahame was born Gloria Hallward on November 28, 1923, in Los Angeles, right on the cusp of an era that would define American cinema for decades to come. Hollywood in the 1920s and 30s was a magical kingdom, conjuring illusions to distract audiences from the harsh realities of the Great Depression. By the time Grahame was a teenager, talkies had completely replaced silent films, and new stars were capturing the public's imagination. Bette Davis, Humphrey Bogart, Barbara Stanwyck. The post-war period of the late 1940s introduced a darker side to American cinema. Films noir that thrived on shadows, moral ambiguity, and a persistent undertone of doom. To an emerging actress like Grahame, that gritty, alluring new style offered an incredible opportunity. She had an aura of smoky seduction, something that set her apart from the more wholesome leading ladies, and a gaze that could shift from vulnerability to lethal contempt in a single frame. Her family ties to entertainment ran deep. Her mother, Jan McDougall, had been an actress under the stage name June Grahame, and her father, Michael Hallward, was an architect who dabbled in set design. As a child, Gloria took drama lessons from her mother, quickly learning the fundamentals of stagecraft. She was bright, restless, and had a knack for capturing attention. Under the guidance of her mother, she changed her last name to Grahame and ventured onto stage and screen. By the early 1940s, she was doing small roles in movies, hoping for her big break. That moment arrived in 1946 when she landed a notable part in It's a Wonderful Life, playing the flirtatious Violet Bick. The film, directed by Frank Capra, eventually became a beloved American classic. But at the time of its release, it wasn't the monster hit one might imagine. Still, Grahame's performance was fresh enough to catch the eyes of studio executives, particularly at RKO and later MGM. Her face, delicate yet capable of flashing a sly smirk, seemed tailor-made for the noir cycle that was about to explode. By 1947, Hollywood had shifted to a darker tone. The war was over, but the optimism that had reigned in musicals and screwball comedies began giving way to cynicism and moral complexity. Films noir were the rage. People wanted stories about desperation in big cities, about betrayal, about the seductive pull of crime. Grahame found her niche in this shadowy terrain. One of her earliest breakthroughs was in the film Crossfire, 1947, where she portrayed a dance hall girl whose world is upended by a brutal murder. Though her part was small, critics noticed her smoky voice and the weary wisdom she brought to the role. It was as if she'd lived through 1,000 heartbreaks behind those eyes. Hollywood recognized it too. She began landing more substantial parts, always some variation of the troubled beauty, the femme fatale, or the woman with a wounded heart capable of both cruelty and tenderness. In 1950, Grahame delivered one of her most memorable performances in a Lonely Place, starring opposite Humphrey Bogart. Directed by Nicholas Ray, who would become one of the key figures in her personal life, the film showcased Grahame's ability to balance vulnerability and danger. She played Laurel Gray, a neighbor drawn into the orbit of a potentially violent screenwriter played by Bogart. The role demanded that Grahame exude an uneasy mixture of affection and suspicion, of wanting to believe in the man she loves, yet fearing he might be a killer. Her chemistry with Bogart crackles on screen. Years later, critics hailed it as one of the best examples of film noir's quintessential broken souls. Off-screen, however, a new drama began. She was entangled with Nicholas Ray personally, a relationship that would set in motion some of the greatest controversies of her life. In 1952, Grahame starred in The Bad and the Beautiful, a glossy MGM melodrama that offered an inside look at Hollywood's ruthless side. She portrayed Rosemary Bartlow, a small but pivotal role that captured her trademark mix of fragility and steely charm. This time, her performance earned her an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, beating out stiff competition. Standing on that stage, clutching the Oscar, Grahame seemed poised to ascend to the upper tier of Hollywood stardom. Yet she was always anxious about her looks, particularly her upper lip. She believed she had a thin, asymmetrical mouth that limited the sort of roles she could play. The rumor mill suggested she underwent multiple plastic surgeries, sometimes stuffing cotton or tissue under her lip during shoots to change its shape. Directors privately complained that her mouth had become less expressive after repeated procedures, making it difficult to capture the subtle emotional signals that had once been her hallmark. Around the same time, Grahame's personal life was careening toward scandal. She had married Nicholas Ray in 1948, her second marriage. The union was tumultuous, filled with passionate quarrels. Ray famously claimed to have found her in bed with his teenage son Anthony Ray, though the timing and specifics are hotly disputed. Regardless, the marriage imploded. Gloria and Nicholas Ray divorced in 1952. In a turn that caused an uproar in Hollywood gossip circles, she later married Anthony Ray, her former stepson, in 1960. The studios, always conscious of public image, were appalled. This union was legal under California law once Anthony reached adulthood, but morally it scandalized the film industry. Even in a town known for messy relationships, this one was considered beyond the pale. Publicists tried to spin the narrative, but by then the damage was done. Audiences grew uncomfortable. Studios worried about moral clauses in contracts, and Grahame's career, which had teetered on the brink of major stardom, nosedived. The scandal overshadowed her undeniable talent. Offers for high-profile films dwindled. Her last major roles in Hollywood included The Big Heat, 1953, and Human Desire, 1954, both directed by Fritz Lang, who admired her ability to play tortured characters with subtlety. Yet after 1955, the big studios no longer wanted to gamble on her. She was relegated to second-tier roles, occasional appearances on television dramas, or smaller movies that never reached the mainstream. Desperate to keep working, she found solace on stage. By the 1960s, Grahame was touring in regional theater productions across the U.S. She also ventured to Britain, where she could still harness the mystique of being a Hollywood star for stage roles, especially in provincial theaters. It was a nomadic far cry from her Oscar-winning heyday, traveling from one small venue to another, sustaining herself on the faint echoes of applause. During these wandering years, Grahame's mental state grew fragile. She was said to be deeply insecure about her fading looks, obsessively checking her reflection and retouching her makeup. She dreaded paparazzi capturing unflattering photos. She hated being recognized, yet couldn't bear obscurity. In interviews, she remained guarded, rarely discussing her personal life or the scandal with Anthony Ray. Colleagues noticed an undercurrent of sadness even when she was smiling. One stage manager recalled finding her backstage, hugging herself and muttering, "If they only knew what I still have inside me." But Hollywood had already passed its judgment. She was labeled damaged goods, the star with a scandal too lurid to forgive. While her personal misfortunes multiplied, her artistry didn't wane. A few who watched her on these small stages attested that she could still captivate an audience in a single line, even if the marquee read the name of an aging star whose best days were behind her. Once Grahame stepped into a role, she channeled the same simmering intensity that made her an icon of film noir. She simply lacked the big-budget studio support and the social acceptance that might have placed her back in the limelight. Her health began deteriorating in the late 1970s. Whispers circulated among theater folk that Grahame seemed unsteady, occasionally wincing in pain during performances. She dismissed concerns with an airy wave, claiming she just had a mild condition. In truth, she had been diagnosed with breast cancer. That alone would have been a devastating blow, but for a woman whose identity hinged so tightly on her physical allure, it was doubly frightening. The treatments threatened to alter her body, possibly diminishing her figure or leaving scars. For Grahame, the idea of losing the physical currency that had defined her entire career was unbearable. She reportedly refused a mastectomy because she feared it would disfigure her, a word that surfaced in her diaries. The disease advanced. Even as she became sicker, Grahame pressed on, determined to work. In 1981, she landed a part in a small play touring around Britain. It wasn't glamorous. The sets were modest, the audiences sometimes half full, but she still applied her lipstick and recited her lines, grasping at the last remnants of spotlight. She collapsed mid-performance, prompting an emergency rush to the hospital. Doctors discovered her cancer had metastasized. The prognosis was grim. Yet Grahame, in denial or perhaps in defiance, left the hospital against medical advice. She insisted she was fine, that she'd rest and return to the stage soon enough. Peter Turner came into her life almost serendipitously. A Liverpool-born actor nearly 3 decades younger than she, Turner had met Grahame during one of her previous English stage tours. They formed an unlikely connection, part romance, part deep friendship. Turner admired her, not just for her legendary past, but for her vulnerability and wit. She delighted in his youthful energy. He offered her a sense of acceptance she rarely found elsewhere. When she collapsed in 1981, Turner took it upon himself to care for her. He brought her to his family's modest home in Liverpool. In that unremarkable house, the once dazzling star of Hollywood film, Noir found a final refuge. She slept on a couch. She wore comfortable clothes. She insisted on applying makeup each day, though increasingly it was more for her own sense of dignity than for any audience. That image, Gloria Grahame lying on a sofa in a modest living room, every so often checking her reflection in a handheld mirror, feels worlds away from the lavish sets of The Bad and the Beautiful or her seductive stroll through the gritty cityscapes of the Big Heat. Yet for Turner, she remained mesmerizing. He later recounted her last days in his memoir, which inspired the film Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool, 2017. Grahame never stopped believing in some corner of her heart that she might make a grand return. She spoke of traveling to the States again, of contacting a few old friends in Hollywood. But deep down, the reality was inescapable. Her body was shutting down, ravaged by cancer that she'd refused to confront in time. On October 5th, 1981, Gloria Grahame died at age 57. Cradled by the only steady affection she had left. The official cause was complications from breast cancer. The newspapers barely noted her passing. A few film columns wrote brief obituaries, referencing her Oscar win and troubled personal life. That was it. No grand tributes, no lavish memorial. Hollywood, the empire of illusions, had effectively forgotten one of its most mesmerizing actresses, its one-time goddess of noir, left to slip away in the quiet suburbs of Liverpool. Today, the life and death of Gloria Grahame still echo as a cautionary tale of how swiftly Hollywood can dispose of women once they deviate from its narrow moral codes or outlive their youthful beauty. She was a master of on-screen tension, of the lingering look that suggested entire worlds of pain. And yet for all her gifts, the combination of scandal, personal insecurities, and health struggles forced her into professional exile. The studios that once heralded her as a sensual dynamo deserted her the moment her personal choices outraged the public. Even her face, which she tried to preserve through surgeries and interventions, became a contested battleground between her real self and the image she thought she had to maintain. For film historians, Grahame matters because she epitomizes the femme fatale archetype of the 1940s and 50s, bringing a subtlety to roles that were often caricatured by lesser actresses. She was rarely the broad, one-dimensional villainess. Instead, she made you sense the heartbreak underlying her character's manipulations. She showcased how a whisper, a single tear, or a fleeting glance could communicate more than pages of dialogue. That skill remains a reference point for modern actors who look to classic Hollywood for lessons in nuance. Her personal saga also resonates in contemporary debates about how women in entertainment are still judged more harshly for their private lives than men. The scandal of marrying a stepson might have stirred gossip about a male star, but would it have ended his career as definitively? Probably not. As we reflect on her legacy, we can see her as a mirror held up to Hollywood's illusions. She was prized for her sultry allure, yet demonized for personal choices. She was lauded for her talent, then dismissed when her off-screen life overshadowed her artistry. If we watch The Big Heat now, we see a performance that is decades ahead of its time in terms of subtlety. If we re-examine In a Lonely Place, we notice how she navigates tenderness and fear in a script brimming with suspicion. She remains mesmerizing, reminding us that talent, once recognized, does not vanish simply because an actress grows older or runs afoul of societal norms. Decades later, we can learn from the life of Gloria Grahame the dangers of a system that entices women to trade their authenticity for fleeting fame, only to discard them when they refuse to conform or inevitably age. We can also learn about the resilience of an artist who continued to perform, no matter how small the stage, until her body gave out. And maybe we can find empathy for the personal tangles she couldn't escape, the surgeries, the scandal, the refusal to treat her cancer because she feared losing the slender figure that once made her famous. We remember Gloria Grahame not just for the scandal that rocked her career or for the surgeries that marred her confidence, but for the exquisite vulnerability she brought to her roles, for the bravery of a woman who refused to be anything but herself, and for the final days that reveal how even the brightest star can be cast into the shadows of exile. Her story lingers as a cautionary tale of how Hollywood can break the very souls it once exalted, and as a testament to how one's devotion to performing can persist, despite every rejection, until life's last breath. In the stillness of her final hours, alone with the man who truly cared for her, Gloria Grahame might finally have found the acceptance she spent a lifetime seeking, long after the camera stopped rolling. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.